The 15th century worked out many of the design problems of the past eras. The rules of linear perspective worked out by the sculptor-turned-architect Filippo Brunelleschi, who in the early part of the century carefully studied and measured the ancient Roman temples and structures, paved the way for Renaissance artists to create according to the principles of mathematics and produce believable and pleasing proportioned figures, buildings, and compositions. New thoughts on the divine role of man, according to the ancient writings of Plato, also surfaced. The humanism of the Renaissance bears little to no resemblance to its modern-day counterpart. It could more accurately have been called a reawakening of Platonic ideas, or Neoplatonism. It was far from an atheistic view of religion, but rather it was considered to be a deeper spiritual understanding of the nature of man. It permeated the social and religious conversations and indeed the arts and sciences of the Renaissance. At the age of 24, Brunelleschi was selected as one of the 2 finalists in a competition in Florence to design the east entrance to the baptistry of San Giovanni. The other finalist in the competition was 23-year-old Lorenzo Ghiberti. Here we see the panels which both young men entered into the contest. The subject matter is the same, the depiction of the intervention of the angel in the sacrifice of Isaac. But the arrangement of the composition and the energy of the characters is quite different. Brunelleschi and his friend and fellow sculptor, Donatello, both agreed that Ghiberti deserved to win the commission, and so they helped persuade the judges that Ghiberti, with his more reposed and graceful rendition, should design the doors. This act of generosity was recorded by Vasari in the chapter on Brunelleschi in his book, The Lives of the Artists. He said, "This was certainly the fruit of friendship, talent without envy, and sound judgment of their own abilities, for which they deserved more praise than if they had brought the project to perfection themselves. What happy spirits are those who, while helping one another, also take pleasure in praising the labor of others." Later, Ghiberti was given the commission to design new east doors to the baptistry, and his former east doors were moved to the north side. These new east doors featured 10 panels illustrating the events from the Old Testament. Michelangelo declared they were so beautiful they would do well for the gates of paradise. Shortly after Brunelleschi lost the baptistry door competition, he and Donatello went to Rome for a period of time to study the ancient Roman ruins. Brunelleschi especially was enthralled by the Romans' architectural feats and proceeded to spend all of his time in Rome drawing, measuring, and calculating their geometry. According to Vasari's account, Brunelleschi was determined to design a dome that would be constructed over the Florence Cathedral, and so he especially studied the Pantheon, noting every aspect of its construction that he could discover. We will return later to Brunelleschi and his quest to build the dome, but it is important to note that through all of his studies and rediscoveries of the ancient Roman design and building practices, Brunelleschi developed a system that has made a significant impact on Western art up to the present and is considered by some to be the principal accomplishment of the Renaissance art. He reinvented from the ancient artists linear perspective. This statue by Donatello was made before his first trip with Brunelleschi to Rome. It was created for the Florence Town Hall and was possibly the reason Donatello was later commissioned by the Medici family to make another David in bronze for the courtyard in their palace in Florence. This statue of David in the nude is considered to be the first freestanding nude since ancient times and sparked a revival in the Renaissance for such figures. Donatello's figure captures the flow and grace of the Renaissance ideal. This David was sculpted by Andrea del Verrocchi many years later in 1473. It was also commissioned by the Medici family and eventually made its way to the Plaza in Florence. Verrocchio maintained a thriving workshop in Florence. We will learn more about one of his students in the next chapter, Leonardo da Vinci. This is a bust of Lorenzo Medici by Verrocchio. It was made when Lorenzo was still ruler of Florence. He ruled with his brother Giuliano, shown here in another sculpture by Verrocchio. This bust of the Lady with Primrose was created in Verrocchio's workshop. It is believed by some to have been sculpted by the young Leonardo da Vinci. This altarpiece by Gentile da Fabriano was created 3 years after moving his workshop to Florence. It shows elements in the Gothic style in the decoration and placement of the figures. What it lacks in depth, it makes up in detail, color, and ornamentation. Fra Angelico painted this painting of the Annunciation for the San Marco Monastery. As a Dominican monk himself, his paintings reflect the simplicity and devotion of their creator. One of his assignments was to decorate the cells of the monks. He painted images that helped the small cell room look larger. Trompe-l'oeil is the French word that we use to describe this technique in art. Paolo Uccello was intrigued by this new science, linear perspective. In his paintings of battle scenes, which were secular novelties among the religious paintings, he seemed intrigued by the many problems of perspective, worked through many of the dramatic angles and perspectives of his figures. Sandro Botticelli painted scenes of mythology for the Medici family. The Primavera tells tales of springtime with Venus looking on. His painting The Birth of Venus, a tempera painting on canvas, is one of its most recognizable works. We will conclude this slideshow with Brunelleschi and his quest to build the dome on the Florence Cathedral. Because the craftsmanship and techniques to build domes had been lost to antiquity, the patrons of the project were hesitant to move forward with a commission. Brunelleschi proposed that all of the famous architects from all corners be summoned to Florence to bid for the job. His reasoning in proposing such a gathering was, according to Vasari, a way of proving himself to be the most capable among them all, because he believed that he only had the possible solutions to its construction. Through his scrutiny of the Roman Pantheon, he had discovered the way in which it was built and was confident that he alone had uncovered its secret. Although he was correct in this assumption, what he didn't expect was that the solution he presented appeared to be so incredible to the council that they laughed at his proposal and finally had to carry him out bodily from their assembly because he kept insisting that he was correct in his proposal. When he stood before them again later on, after much private lobbying, he proposed that the one who should build the dome was the architect who could stand an egg on its end on the marble table in front of them. Each of the great architects who were present tried, but none could stand the egg on its end. Brunelleschi then stepped forward, took the egg in his hand, and lightly tapped its end on the table, crushing the shell slightly, and thereby successfully standing the egg on its end in front of the entire assembly. When the other architects protested that they could have stood the egg up too if they had broken the shell, Brunelleschi agreed and said they also could have designed the dome if they had discovered the methods to do so by studying the ancient architecture as he had done. Eventually they conceded the design to him, but still lacking total faith in his plan, they assigned a second architect to work with him, Lorenzo Ghiberti, the same artist who years before had won the competition of the baptistry doors to which Brunelleschi lost. This partnership in building did not please Brunelleschi. He was later able to find a way to expose Ghiberti's lack of knowledge in building the dome, and thereby becoming the sole and chief designer. The dome was safely and successfully built, and still rests upon the cathedral in Florence.